Yo, what's up? I'm KallaTheYapper, and I'm back with another reaction. Today, I'm going to react to a video made by Enigma. Enigma. There we go. Their video is about the loneliest protagonist in Gacha, Rover and Wuthering Waves story. This video was out a month ago. It has 6.2k views, and I want to react to it because I want to hear what criticisms people have for Wuthering Waves. Because I'm gonna be honest, I do not see much criticisms about Wuthering Waves, despite the fact the community claims that, oh, we are the community that gives criticism to our game versus any of the Hoyo games. But I hardly see that pumped out when it comes down to YouTube videos. Granted, there's probably some of it on, who knows, Twitter or Reddit, possibly. I'm not saying like it doesn't exist at all, but it's a possibility that it does exist there. But I've seen more positivity about the game and glazing the game versus criticism of it. But anyway, enough of that. Let's get into the video.
The core cast of any saga can make or break the story. From Genshin's Aether and Paimon to Limbus Company's 12 Sinners or even Honkai Star Rail's Astral Express, a core group of characters can easily excel a mid-story to greatness, or they can easily bog it down into delirium. And then there's Wuthering Waves, where the entire core cast is just Rover. And for a story so focused on memory, emotion, and identity, this might be the biggest weakness. My name is Void Enigma, and I'll be discussing the concept of the core cast in gacha games, and what Wuthering Waves is doing, or failing to do. I'm
gonna express my opinion about Wuthering Waves' story right now. I feel like Wuthering Waves is trying to speed rush his story. That's what it feels like to me, personally. Because I feel like we only got like 1 or 2 questions remaining about the Rover as a character before we know everything, and then after that, it is what it is, right? Because honestly, I'm still confused on why they're even still going on this journey about trying to find out who they were, because they already found out who they were back in the Black Shores. So why are they still pressing on with their journey then?
Most games build their identity across their poster character, the figure on the icon that anchors the game world with the player experience. But Wuthering Waves has been riding on the fact that Yang Yang is their icon, but her presence in the story doesn't even exist.
Yeah, she's a trash character, that's why. And shoot, that's not just her being a trash character. She's just very underutilized. Her purpose in the story is nothing. Like March 7th and Paimon, I can argue their presence in the story having more weight versus Yang Yang. Like Paimon's relationship with the Traveler is important because again, Paimon was the first person that the Traveler met after waking up after what, 500 years being asleep or whatever, when they fought the unknown god. And Paimon is the closest person, the second most closest person to the Traveler. Then Lumine is to the Traveler, and Lumine is the Traveler's sister. When it comes to March 7th, March 7th was the first person that the Trailblazer ever saw when they woke up, right? For the first time. Well, quote unquote first time, because realistically it's probably the second time in their entire lifespan, where they woke up and they saw Dong Hung and March 7th, and they greeted them and was like, yo, bro, you okay? You good? And then they just been, kicking it with the Astral Express with March 7th. And they've engaged with March 7th a lot, from seeing what she likes, what she dislikes, how she acts, all that stuff. Yang Yang, she only existed one time and then became non-existent moving forward.
Which is a problem. Like seriously, did the story devs just throw a dart at a board and just pick the character that it landed on? Crap! We got Yang Yang, but a deal's a deal.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
Let's go with it. Let's set that concept aside and deconstruct the value of a core cast. Make sure to subscribe to the video if you're enjoying it so far, like the video, and let's go. Rover roving these Wuthering Waves is the game of this gacha game, and I don't think that will ever change. This is Rover's story, from start to even now, and while other characters share the spotlight from time to time, they later fall into obscurity as Rover moves on to a new region, and it's a gacha game after all. And that's the core problem of the story of gacha games. It's a gacha.
I would disagree. Case in point, Zenless Zone Zero. When it came down to Zenless Zone Zero, every character we met from every chapter built up to a grand moment back in version 1. So I have to disagree with that. 1.5 didn't have a direct connection to version 1.4 in terms of characters, which is fine because it was its own self-contained story. When it came down to 1.6 to 1.7, that was a tied together story that also tied to the main character of the story and to other characters that we came across in earlier patches of version 1. Version 2, we're doing that again. We're building up factions and character relationships to build up to a grandiose conclusion whenever it, hopefully I hope the grandiose conclusion of version 2 or season 2 of Zenless Zone Zero does not happen at version 2.4. I hope it's at version 2.6 or 2.7. Personally, that's just me.
The best stories focus on a small group of characters.
Give me one moment, BRB. Ooh, excuse me, my bad. Had to go help a family member. You feel me? Anyway, let's continue.
Or you focus on a few main characters in different regions and you kind of have their stories interacting at the same time. In a gacha game, you just can't do that. The whole concept of a gacha is to sell as many...
He says that, but he's already showing scenes that completely disprove his point. Hold on, let's continue. Let's go back a little bit.
...regions and you kind of have... From time to time, they later fall into obscurity as Rover moves on to a new region, and it's a gacha game after all. And that's the core problem of the story of gacha games. It's a gacha. The best stories focus on a small group of characters. Or you focus on a few main characters in different regions and you kind of have their stories interacting at the same time.
Both of those points are true because that does happen.
In a
but that doesn't devalue the characters.
Gacha game, you just can't do that.
He says in the gacha game you just can't do that, but that has happened in all these, especially in these big four gacha games that's out right now. The very thing he's saying that this is how the story usually goes, but because it's a gacha, they don't do that, while showing examples of them actually doing that. Huh? What? Don't even get me started on the Amphoria story. The Amphoria story has a big cast of characters. And guess what? Each one of them get their moments to shine in the story for their moments meant for them. They don't just, they existed in chapter 1 and then they stop existing after that. Nope. They continue to exist. They're just not playing a big role in this story beat because they are not needed for this story in particular. They've played their role. They've met their fate that they're supposed to meet, at least in the case of Amphorias. Some of them made it to the end while others didn't.
The whole concept of a gacha is to sell as many characters as possible. That's why in games like Genshin and Wuthering, you move from region to region to collect as many body samples as possible to add to your pocket dungeon to spawn out your next character to use at will.
But we know in the core concept of it all, yeah, sure. We move from region to region and collect new characters, that's true. But to make the claim that they can't make a good story in the midst of that, in the realm of that, is just not true. Is Fontaine's story bad because it's a gacha game? No. What about Sumeru? No, it's still a good story. Inazuma is something you can argue. There's a lot of character writing that could have been given more depth, more fleshing out, that they could have done in the midst of the main story, but they handled it more so after the main story and in A's second story quest, first and second story quest. So that was a problem there. For Natlan feels like it falls into this category because there's a handful of Natlan characters that's supposed to be the heroes of Natlan who didn't get a lot of screen time to flesh out their characters, which was a big negative to Natlan's story. And I've criticized that. So it's not that they can't make these amazing stories. It's just depending on how they execute it depends on whether or not it falls off. It's not that they can't, it depends on how the execution.
While this is the name of the game, there are actually ways to alleviate this and make a cohesive story. Honkai Star Rail has the Astral Express, the Trailblazer, Dung Hung, and March 7th. Those three are considered the main cast of Honkai Star Rail. They are considered the pivotal plot points, and the game revolves around these three. They are also the only three characters that have more than one form. This is actually a great point in Star Rail, but the issue with Star Rail doesn't come from its core cast. It comes from its slow pacing and lack of really good storytelling, but if they remove those...
I disagree with that. This video was made a month ago. Where was he not keeping up with version 3 of Amphorius' story? The storytelling for Amphorius got better and better with each update patch moving forward since version 3.1, I would argue. So this idea that they haven't gotten better is BS.
Core cast. It comes from its slow pacing and lack of really good storytelling, but if they remove those concepts, then this would actually be a great story. Now, a game that embodies the concept of a core cast the best...
Let me give you an example of those, how they've made the storytelling better for Star Rail. Case in point, for one, every character's story is interconnected with each other, and they are given time to focus and flesh out their characters. They give 2D visual murals for their character stories, and there's like multiple pieces of artwork to show their story to us, the player. They change up camera angles, they change up facial expressions, all that other shit, body poses, voice acting, all that stuff plays a good role. Music, tone, when it's time to play good music, when it's time to play sad music, blah, 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 all that good stuff. But for the visual aspect of Star Rail, when it comes to storytelling, it's actually done a really good job ever since version 3.1 till now.
Is hands down Limbus Company, with Nikke and Brown Dust being close contenders. You see, Limbus Company has 12 sinners, well 13 if you include Dante, but he is the protagonist who commands the sinners and is therefore unplayable. So, how do you make a gacha game with thousands of different characters out of the 12 playable sinners? Well, you don't. You create an identity system. Still a gacha game, I guess. Instead of releasing new character after new character, they simply add something like a skin to each character. So for instance, Don Quixote has different identities, but they all have the same personality with some major quirks. They each lived a different life and it's still the same person. Think of it like an alternate version of the same character. So one Don could be a goofy cultist who wears heavy armor and looks funny, while another Don could be a high-tier vampire lord who can...
So basically, this is similar to what Fate Grand Order has done, where you have alter versions of the most beloved characters in the game. For example, you have Saber, then you have Saber Alter. You have John d'Arc, then you have John Alter. Archer Emiya, or Counter Guardian Emiya, then you have Alter Emiya. Basically, that's what this is.
Who commands a legion of blood fiends, and another Don could be a magical girl who shoots arcana magical beams, and also Slick gets demented in the process. The identity system and mirror worlds concept in Limbus is beautiful. Sure, you don't get any new characters in the game, but you have your stock standard group, and they're all batshit crazy in their own unique and fun way, and they all get power-ups as the story progresses. This makes an extremely cohesive story, and throughout all of Heaven and Gacha Hell, without a doubt, Limbus Company's story remains the strongest. A major flaw with gacha games is thinking that every character that gets released needs a grand explanation. Games like Nikke and Brown Dust 2 just drop characters with, assets, and people lap that.
I mean, naturally, it's a fan service game. That's what they promise. Why wouldn't you eat it up? Shoot, I want to eat it up, but unfortunately, I don't know how I'm going to be able to play the game with my limited devices.
Now, while these games aren't played primarily for their story, they have some of the most solid stories in any gacha game. You just need to get past the massive valley of fan service to reach it.
I don't know why he's framing it like that. Just because fan service exists does not water down the weight and tone of the story. Don't know why he framing it like that.
Many of the newer characters released do lack major story elements, but they are still introduced for people to get them. People pull based on the pure design of characters all the time. Look at Chisa from Wuthering Waves. She's the most valued upcoming 5-star, and we don't know a thing about her.
Yeah, so true. Niggas do not know nothing about this chick, yet niggas want to pull for her. Which, understandable, because character design. It screamed to them. Oh, schoolgirl character design? Black hair, the classical Asian beauty, right? Then she got like a giant sword too, a katana, something like that.
We don't even know what region she's from. This is an example in itself. So if people pull based strictly on character design anyways, why do the gacha giants take the time to weave intricate and delicate stories in each region involving as many characters as they can?
Because they want the characters to actually have depth and not just be, oh, here's the new toy. Because if that's what they want to do, then you might as well just strip this game from its story, from its exploration or combat. You might as well just strip it. But not even, yeah, you might as well just strip all those aspects about the game entirely. If people just want to pull for the character because they look hot, because they look cute, because they look awesome, they look cool, they look like Chads, they look like mommies, they look like MILFs and all the other stuff, right? Because people were only pulling because they know that they can't just have the characters just look hot and then have nothing of any, solid foundation behind them. And also because, let's be honest, from a creator standpoint, why would you create such an awesome looking character and not think to yourself, man, I feel like I can give a story, give a life of a story to this character that makes this character come to life, like they're a real person, because that's what the natural thought process is, right? Oh, hold up.
So if people pull based strictly on character design anyways, why do the gacha giants take the time to weave intricate and delicate stories in each region involving as many characters as they can? We don't pick who we love in gacha games. For me, it was Changli. Love at first sight. Everyone else saw a hot, fiery phoenix pink lady, and I saw a divine goddess. After being associated with the Church of Changli for over a year now, I finally can admit that she is just the best character with the best story in all of Wuthering Waves.
Best story in all of Wuthering Waves is crazy. I'm gonna say that right now. That's crazy. The best story in all of Wuthering Waves? Nah. I played her story quest. I don't think her story is the best story in all of Wuthering Waves. I would disagree with that take entirely. Her story was alright, in my opinion. Was it ultra grandiose? No. I think it was fine and cool to establish her character and her relationship between herself and the rover and her relationship with Jin Shi. And some of her backstory to understand where she came from and why she does what she does. Other than that, I wouldn't. I think it was a good story. I'd give the story like a 8 out of 10. But her story being the most interesting out of every other character in the game is questionable.
Those weren't delusions brought forth by my unhealthy addiction to Changli. No, those were facts.
Also, no, he's speaking from delusion. I'm sorry. Let me say something real quick.
By my unhealthy addiction.
This woman, when I saw her for the first time, she looks like a freaking demon succubus ready to take your soul. She looks evil.
To Changli.
Look at his face. There was something I noticed off rip about her that was so unsettling. Which, again, this is actually points to her character. A good thumbs up points is that that's the feel that they wanted to give off for her character, which played a role in her story quest where they had this one dude being like, yo, there's something off about that chick. She's clearly doing what she's doing for malicious purpose, blah 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 blah, right? And then when he noticed her around the corner, he immediately got to step in because he feared that she may kill him or something like that.
No, those were facts. Brought forth by my unhealthy addiction to Changli nonetheless, but on the way. A story can really drive you to get a character. I've never been one to pull a character after their story, but damn, have I been close to doing it sometimes. For Lova, for instance, it took everything in my bones to not pull her after that immaculate story of version 2.5. Genshin and Wuwa are very similar in the fact that Rover and Aether and Lumine are the main protagonists. This journey follows them and the people that they meet. I consider Paimon as part of the core cast of Genshin, and I don't consider Abby as a part of the core cast in Wuwa.
This is a valid take. Now I know some people who may listen to that be like, no, that's not valid. No, it actually is valid. Paimon is there consistently with the Traveler. She consistently there. She doesn't go disappear and go to sleep for, let's say, hours on end or chapters on end in the story. It didn't just randomly appear again just for the sake of it, or for whatever reason they want Abby to appear again. Because the way they treat Abby in the story is actually freaking sucks. I want Abby to be on screen more. I want this little fluffy bastard to be present in the story more, especially if they're supposed to be treated as the companion of Rover because of whatever connection that Rover and Abby have to each other, for why this Echo in particular has the ability to speak and communicate with people. It is by far we don't even truly know what Abby is. The only thing we can assume is that Abby is an Echo, but Abby is the most unique Echo that exists if we believe that Abby is an Echo, right? The fact that Abby gets treated to be like this sideline background character for most of the time and doesn't get the chance to be on screen most of the time sucks, especially knowing that there's an underlying important connection between the Rover and Abby. For Paimon has everything that Abby is missing. Paimon, she gets treated as the Traveler's companion. The Traveler has shown multiple different instances where they're protecting Paimon or they're having a sincere moment with Paimon and whatnot, because Paimon is legitimately the first ever person that the Traveler has ever met in the world of Teyvat in Genshin's story. They are the Traveler's first ever real friend in the entire story. And on top of that, there are secrets and things that the Traveler has not told any other playable character in the game versus Paimon. Paimon learns so much in-depth secret stuff related to the Traveler before any other playable character does. Are like friends that the Traveler has met from nation to nation. Like, for example, the spaceship thing. Paimon was the one who learned about that first. The whole relationship with knowing that that the Traveler's sister is a part of the Abyss Order. Guess who learns about that first? Paimon does. No one else in the cast learns about that. Right? The Traveler just goes around asking everyone about have they seen the Traveler's sister, and they usually say no for the most part. Nahida, she knows that Lumine's fate has been obfuscated in some type of way that's making them connected to Teyvat, despite the fact that Lumine and Aether have only recently come to Teyvat for the first time. They shouldn't be connected to it at all, but somehow the sister is connected to the world. But even with that, Nahida is not like a close companion that knows more in-depth stuff about Aether and Paimon, Aether and Traveler, or Aether and their sister. Like, oh, they have a spaceship, or they come from a destroyed civilization. Like, no other character in the game knows stuff like that except Paimon. That's why Paimon's relationship with the Traveler is so important. Abby's, on the other hand, is downplayed for some weird ass reason. And I guess it's because they don't want Abby to be having the same type of screen time that Rover does, despite the fact that this character has a lot of important ties to the Rover, which is weird. The tie itself isn't weird, but how they treat Abby is weird.
For quite a few different regions. 1. Paimon is always there no matter what. Every cutscene, every moment, every dialogue, Paimon is there. Abby, on the other hand, is normally just inside Rover's tacit mark. She comes and goes as she's actually called for, but she's more of a recurring character than a core member. Despite this, however, I actually consider, surprisingly enough, Dainsleif as a core member of Team Genshin. But let me explain. Genshin's story is 90% filler. The real
saying that Genshin's story is 90% filler, despite the fact everything that we do in the main story actually has important effects in the overall grand story of Genshin Impact, is crazy work. To say that everything that we've done in the main story is filler, except for the Dainsleif quest, is by far the most dumbest thing ever to be said out of someone's mouth. On God, it is. Because the consequence of action that happens at the end of each Archon quest is something that implodes and like completely shakes the structure of how the world structure is. From Sumeru with the Akasha system and how it affects the academia, to Liyue Harbor and its structure of who leads and governs Liyue Harbor, to how Fontaine and how it was fated to be destroyed. The nation was supposed to be washed away and destroyed. It was proclaimed by the heavenly principles that it will be destroyed, but they survived their fate. Natlan. Let me think. Natlan. What was the piece of Natlan? Natlan's war with the abyss and their forever struggle against it, and finally concluding it and dispelling it from the Night Kingdom, and the captain being the one who brought forth a paradox to the entire ley line structure of not just Natlan, but I guess the entire world. And there's a rippling effect that will cause, and so on. So it's like, I disagree with this take that Genshin's story is filler. It's like, no, it's not.
I actually consider, surprisingly enough, Dainsleif as a core member of Team Genshin. But let me explain. Genshin's story is 90% filler. The real story elements that matter always come from the Dainsleif story, which
That's not entirely true.
actually progresses the story. When it comes to the main Archon quest, they don't really push the story forward at all. We only ever get real story progression to the Traveler's goal when we're dealing with Dainsleif, and that's to actually find their sibling. Even if we get the Dainsleif quest about once,
I'd argue that everything that we've done in the main Archon quest and even the Dainsleif quest are both important, because the Traveler in their journey to find their sibling and reunite with their sibling, they're in the process, because this is an important factor to Genshin's story that he has not brought up, is that the Traveler having connections to this world makes him understand and love this world more and more. So anytime he sees his sister trying to destroy this world and these nations, with the Abyss Order to get that done, he's immediately defensive about it, and he's like, I can't agree with you doing this. I don't understand why you're doing this. This, that, and the third. I understand, like, I don't get it. Why are you doing this? What's wrong with this world that you deem as a problem? Right? Because another thing that's about the Traveler, it is implied through the Traveler's own lore in their character information that the Traveler is meant to ascend to the seat of God, right? But only after they come to understand this world entirely. And what better way for a main character who's supposed to become the new god of a world to fully get to that seat in a position if they don't actually engage with the world? That's what the Traveler is doing. That's the purpose of the Traveler's journey. Not only to reunite with their sibling, but also engage with the world and become connected to it to truly understand the world that they are in and that they're traveling in. That is a big plot point related to the Traveler. But for some, I guess Void, Ignata, whatever, Void does not either understand that, or he missed that point entirely.
Dainsleif, and that's to actually find their sibling. Even if we get the Dainsleif quest about once a year, it is the one that we really look forward to. Genshin, however, completely omits their past characters for new story concepts. Once they get their story, it's over. They get scenes and events, which are literal filler, but as far as story presence, they may as well not even exist anymore.
That's not true. The framing of it, was like, okay, let's go and get this on. For each region we go to, naturally, when we meet these characters in said region, and we don't really expect to see them in the next region, naturally, because all the core important events in this region happened here, right? This was the main conflict of this region. Therefore, these characters were there for that because it affects them too. In the case of Mondstadt, Liyue, Inazuma, Sumeru, Fontaine, Natlan. But in the case of Nodcry, they have already implied that, for one, I know Charlotte, a 4-star character in Fontaine, she's making her way. She is in the last update, which was version 5.8. She's in the process, or last time I heard, she was in the process of making her way towards Nodcry. So more than likely, we're going to see her there in Nodcry. Also, another thing that I find interesting, this video was made a month ago. Where was Homeboy at when they revealed that Scaramouche and Albedo were going to show up in Nodcry? So even his point that he's making doesn't even make sense, knowing that that's what's happening with Nodcry right now. Even Dory, a 4-star character from Sumeru that we met back in version 3.0, even she is in Nodcry. So this whole point that he's making is bullshit. It doesn't even make sense.
Once they get their story, it's over. They get scenes and events, which are literal filler, but as far as story presence, they may as well not even exist anymore. They have their banners, they have their fun, and then it's over for them.
This scene is promising though. Okay, so he admits that, but he should have realized that this is makes his point invalid. You can't say this scene is promising though. This scene completely invalidates the point he was making.
Any character in the Fatui is an exception, especially with the Harbingers like Child and Arlecchino, but they may be important to the Snezhnaya story, and that's it.
They're important to the overall story too, because they're out here getting these gnosis.
But
he went out to get the Geonosis. He completed his job. Then he went about. Then there was an event where he admitted that he was looking for Scaramouche because he took the Electronosis and they did not know where he went. And then of course that leads us to Inazuma. He wasn't there for Inazuma, but he was there for Fontaine, and he played a major role in Fontaine's story. Well, not a major, but he played a portion of Fontaine's story where, in relation to the narwhal waking up and him fighting it, which then led it to the opera house and eventually led us to Skirk. So he played actually a really significant role. Arlecchino, we learned that Arlecchino is helping with a project related to Nodcry and the Doctor and a handful of other Harbingers that they're going to get done soon, called Project Stuja. We did learn this in Arlecchino's story quest. And not only that, she did play a role in Fontaine's Archon quest, where she was pressing Farina about what exactly is she going to do related to the prophecy, and she was showing her disgust towards like divine beings that are the gods, because she finds them to be BS, because they say, oh well, oh wow, oh, you don't understand me because I'm a god and God operates in mysterious ways, and she finds that to be BS.
But they may be important to the Snezhnaya story, and that's it. Meanwhile, with Wuthering...
Actually, no, those two characters are actually important to the overall story for Genshin Impact as well, because Snezhnaya, at least the Fatui, have made themselves a prevalent threat in the story as antagonists. So naturally, they play a role in it. They've played the role of antagonists in the main story for quite a while, for a couple of years now. So they don't just exist for the sake of Snezhnaya's story, they exist for the sake of the entire Genshin story. Because, again, the Sarita is collecting the Gnosis, and that is a big deal. That is not some hand-wave thing.
Wuthering, Rover is the standalone Snezhnaya story, and that's it. Meanwhile, with Wuthering, Rover is the standalone protagonist on his journey to solve the issues of the Lament. Frolova, a character introduced in version 1.0, was an integral part of that story, and that story has been wrapped up in version 2.5. We did a lot in Honglong, and we haven't heard anything from Chixia or even Yang Yang. Like, seriously. She's the mascot of Wuwa, and she's been gone since version 1.1. We did a lot of Renacida as well, and now we move on to Septimon, and there's no mentions of characters like Bransurt Roshia. We get transmissions from the Black Shores, and KallaTheYapper has been a major part of the story since she's been released in version 2.2, even up until now, but we have not even checked on Shorekeeper since the start of Renacida. Now we have Septimon, and a new large cast of new characters.
And I think that just goes to the whole thing of what characters they want to use for the story versus characters they don't think is needed for the story. I think that's just the mentality of it and why it's written a certain way that it's written, right? For example, what big role is the Black Shores playing that requires us to be like, okay, bring forth Shorekeeper, right? Because she's the one who's maintaining the system now, I'm pretty sure, right? Granted, a valid point that someone could make is that for this transmission scene, they could have just had, Shorekeeper be here with KallaTheYapper instead of this NPC. They could have replaced it with Shorekeeper. That would be a valid point to make.
Released in version 2.2, even up until now, but we have not even checked on Shorekeeper since the start of Renacida. Now we have Septimon, and a new large cast.
And I was saying the reason why we haven't checked on Shorekeeper at the start, since the start of Renacida, is because I don't think the story was like, oh, we need to check on her right now. They've called in about 3 different times after we finished like the main story stuff. But other than that, I don't think it was a real big necessary for them to be actively present, or rather Shorekeeper in particular to be actively present.
Some new characters to build bonds.
Oh, hold on, let me go back a little bit actually.
From the Black Shores.
Not hearing anything from Brant or Roshia when it comes down to Septimon makes sense, knowing that for one, all they wanted was to like participate in the carnival and make sure the carnival went down and actually, went through. So what point would they need to be in Septimon? What point would it be there for them to be there? Granted, the natural answer someone would probably potentially give me would be, oh, well, since they are a what you call it, a troupe of like dancers and musicians, it would make sense for them to come to Septima and like do a play or do some type of festival or participate in a festival, right? But from what we've seen from Septima, we haven't seen a lot of musical festivals at all. We've seen more gladiatorial stuff, so musical festivals might not happen unless they're like, okay, we're gonna do something different this time or this year, right?
Mentions of characters like Bran Roshia. We get transmissions from the Black Shores, and KallaTheYapper has been a major part of the story since she's been released in version 2.2, even up until now, but we have not even checked on Shorekeeper since the start of Renacida. Now we have Septimon, and a new large cast of new characters to build bonds with,
and I will say this though, knowing that Shorekeeper runs the Black Shores or is a part of the Black Shores, and the Black Shores is supposed to be like this base of operation where they track like the lament and like any tacit discord stuff and like the black tide and stuff like that. The fact that that's the purpose and goal of that organization, yet that organization doesn't play like a big factor role in like Hong Long's story or in Renacida's story or even Septimon's story is kind of crazy if you think about it.
Sadly, new characters to forget. We as players, we won't forget our favorites, but it's sad when the story forgets our old characters. On the bright side, we have had moments where Rover talks about Jinshi in the actual Cantarella part of the story, but I think this is really just due to the fact that Jinshi is a sentinel of the Honglong, meaning that they'll always be important to the story. Jinshi is somewhat of a 6-star resonator along with KallaTheYapper, so they are just built different. All the other
aka they have more story importance compared to other characters.
The characters who support them, however, for instance Chang Li and Cantarella, the main pillars for the Sentinels Resonators, they may as well not even be considered part of the story.
I mean, that's kind of valid, no? Why would you mention the supporters, the support characters of the Sentinel, you know, blessed individuals? Why would you even bother mentioning them when the people you need to mention, especially in context that you're mentioning, are KallaTheYapper and Jinshi? You wouldn't mention Shang Li and Cantarella when you're talking about those two individuals unless you need to. But in context of most conversations, you don't need to mention them. You need to mention, again, KallaTheYapper and Jinshi.
Story anymore.
That's like in Genshin, where you think back to, let's say, Nahida, because in context to the conversation you're having, it's tied to like wisdom and knowledge, and then you mention Nahida in passing. Are you going to then mention Wanderer as well? Like, no, because he's not related to the conversation.
If these characters did get involved, it would kind of destroy the foundation of a great story. You can only have so many characters in a new region, and if you're going to be creating a gacha game, you may as well create new characters to sell while you actually create these new regions and new stories. After all, if you can make an impactful story for each and every character that gets released, then maybe you can forgive them for never returning to the story. So to finally answer the question, is Rover being a solo character an issue for Wuthering Waves? Yes and no. You see, as of right now, the Wuthering Waves story is a mixed bag. Some say it's decent, some say it's downright awful, but we have moments like the 2.2 story and the 2.5 story where they focus in on a main core cast of characters, and these are the stories that shine. In the early segments of Wuthering Waves, it was strictly Rover, and a large cast of characters. Even at the start of 2.0, it felt like there was so much happening, so we couldn't quite tune into the important characters, but it still was pretty concise with that of Carlotta, Brant, and Rochia. Rather than having 10 plus characters all interacting in one quest, if we focus on just 2 to 4 at most, then the story will actually thrive because of it. You can develop a great complex dynamic between these characters, and it's just overall a good thing to do. I feel if Wuthering continues to deliver story sagas like this and delve more into the tragic side of these characters, their story as a whole will improve tremendously. Even version 2.4 with Lupa, I loved it, and while everyone didn't consider it a masterpiece, focusing on purely Lupa, KallaTheYapper, and Rover made this story all the better.
And I would agree. I agree. Not what... Hold on, let me say. I agree, right? Because if you reduce the cast that you're using to tell a story about, it's sometimes for the best because, one, you're probably not confident in your ability to write multiple characters and have their story intertwine with each other, or give them time to flesh out said characters, right? Because that's very ambitious to do, which is why that ambition is paying off when it comes out in the case of Honkai Star Rail, right? You have an entire chapter of a story that gets released for Honkai Star Rail, and in the case of the Amphorius chapter, and that entire chapter focuses on two main characters, who are the new characters that have come out. And they get their time to shine and have their characters fleshed out and expanded upon in the story, which is really great because ultimately you're focusing on two characters for each story patch, and it was good. So reducing the number of characters that you need to focus on in the story, so you can mainly focus on at least 1, 2, or 3 characters. It will help build those characters up. Granted, execution is still the end-all be-all, and if you can't even execute a good story among 3 characters versus, like, say, 6, then you need to get back to the workshop and, get your skills up.
It's obvious that Wuwa has the keys to make a great and concise story, and as long as they keep up this pattern, the story can be considered a good one. This is and always will be Rover's story, so the extra characters are just there for the ride. Except Chang-Li, she's the best character out there, so no one's ever gonna put her down, come on, What do you all think, though? Would you like for Rover to have an entourage of characters like Chi-Si or Yang Yang, or is it better for Rover to be the solo individual of this story?
I'm gonna say this, I prefer the Rover to have a companion, an active companion that's always present 24/7. Because if the Rover is supposed to be an individual who belongs to this world and has lived in this world multiple times, why not have Ambi be there present all the time? Why isn't Ambi this vessel of, I've held on to every memory of the Rover every time they've wiped their brain clean? Why is it that we have to go to the Black Shores to learn about it rather than, having Ambi be the one to express this information? Because apparently Ambi is supposed to be the companion of Rover. Right? Which is why I like the relationship between the Traveler and Paimon. The only negative side to the relationship between the Traveler and Paimon is simply this. Since Aether doesn't get a chance to, isn't allowed to speak most times, the majority of times throughout the entire game until recently with version 6.0, the Traveler has spoken more and more. Granted, I've only finished Act 1. I need to finish Act 2, which I am going to play soon. But having the Traveler speak more and have more voice lines for when they engage with Paimon will help express their personality even more so. This isn't to say that their personality isn't already expressed well enough via the dialogue box that you click or that you read out, and you're like, okay, I see what the Traveler is saying to Paimon, and Homeboy is either joking around with her, or he's being serious with her, or he's being whatever he's being in the moment when he's engaged in conversation with her, right? So you can extrapolate what his personality is or how he engages with Paimon based off those dialogue boxes, naturally speaking, right? But I do still think that if he had more voice lines spoken out and they were more audible for people to hear, people would enjoy their relationship more and more. Because their relationship is an actual good relationship. There's no doubt about that.
Leave a comment down below on your conceptions of the Wuwa story. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Make sure to leave a like and thank you.
Alright. That's the end of the video. I'm gonna be honest with how I feel about Wuwa story. I feel like Wuwa story is speed rushing through its stuff. Is speeding through it. That's how I feel about it. More so in who the Rover is as an individual, because we've already sped run the fact that the Rover owns and created the Black Shores. That's the biggest piece of character information that we learned about the Rover. Another big piece about the character information related to the Rover is that we learned that the Rover is the Arbiter, and she was the master of Joy, the Sentinel that has the ability to manipulate time. So that's two big important factors about the Rover. Another important factor about the Rover is that we know that they live for a very long time, an extended lifespan, if you will, thanks to Chang-Li's story quest or the Black Shores, where we learn more about the rover and their role there, and the even in the Septimont story where we learn about this legendary individual that's a part of Hong Long's history, about how they created the civilization that is Jinsho on the nation of Hong Long, because they're like an ancient historical figure. So we already have like these things that extrapolate from the rover that are very important about the rover, that tells us about what and who they are, or more so what they are in the world. No, I was right the first time. Who and what they are in the world of what you call it, Wuthering Waves, right? So we've already sped ran and learned so much about them in such a short, amount of time, rather than being revealed to us piece by piece, in not stretched out, but more so in good spacing between each like moment, right? I feel like it's more so that they're less so that they're speed rushing the story. It's more so that they have sped rush information related to the rover's character and not the story itself. Granted, I'm still confused on what exactly the rover is still doing now, because we went to Renacida to try to find a way to save Ambi from disappearing and fix their frequency, which we succeeded in doing. But every moment after the fact, I'm confused on what we're doing. Now, when we got to Septimont, we were going there because we would try to find out, okay, what was going on with Fer-de-Lis, and then ended up for us, destroying that Sonoro spear created by Cristoforo, and then now we're doing the whole going after the hunt. We're on the hunt against the Black Tide, which is still, something that's happening right now in the story. And we know that the Black Tide was coming thanks to, I think, the version 2.5 story, where they said it's about to emerge and stuff like that. So we're reaching the peak of craziness in Renacida as a whole right now in the story, which part 2 of 2.6's main story has dropped, and I need to play that. I'm going to play it when I have the time. So I think I said everything I needed to say. So like, sub, turn on the notification bell. I'm going to leave a link in the description to this consecrated video. So go check it out for yourself. Give it a like and all that dandy stuff. And I'll see y'all in the next reaction. Peace.